Welcome, everyone, to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. And I'm super excited to get a chance to talk to Kamal. Let's welcome Kamal as well.
Yes. I'm really excited to have you, Kamal. Kamal Pradhan, VP at HR Technology and Operations for Signify Health. Super to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Pete and Julie. Happy New Year to both of you. Really excited to be here. Let me know if the sound's clear.
Yeah. No, you're good. It's all we need, man.
Look,
go ahead, Julie. Do the honors.
We just actually have our fun questions, which you use to test your sound and make sure it's coming across okay.
Yep.
Let's do it.
We have yet to find folks who tried to be in HR and payroll, but we're super interested to know, how did you get into this space?
It was my lifelong dream. That's what I want to say, but it's not.
Fake news.
No, so I have to go back a little bit if you don't mind. So I grew up in a country named Nepal, Mount Everest, and all the cool things with nature, right? That was a lot of my upbringing. And one of the key things was just around water resources, right? Both of my folks were in power company, and so my goal was to really be an electrical engineer and really focus on hydropower. That's what I wanted to be. And I did do my academics here in the States in engineering and in Alabama a long time ago. I won't say the exact time, but as the recession hit, we all know how it turned out. And luckily I had credits on the technology side, and it was just that first project, Julie, where it had to be an HR project and technology. And I was like, okay, I like this. And over the years, I got to do different, HR related technology pieces and operation pieces, from implementation to support, ranging from industries like oil and gas to entertainment, companies like AMC Theaters, Hallmark. And I got to see this view, from every vantage point. And I fell in love with HR. And I think we all went through that revolution, outside of HR, from a technology side, going from on-prem applications to cloud, right? Everything was like, moving over from a digitization. And that's really how it started my HR journey. And, the more I fell in love, I kind of thought, like, technology is important, but the most important thing is actually the people, and how does HR really help the businesses? So that's how it started, Julie, Pete.
Yeah. So is it falling in love? Like, I think by the time this airs, it'll be coming up on Valentine's Day. Is it falling in love with HR that keeps you here, or something else, or some other dimensions, or what makes you stay?
The love of the game.
I would say the love of the game, but I think I won't say it's falling in love with HR, to be, realistic. I think I really love the people that we work with across the board, right? Within, I think that HR is one of many functions within the organizations. And, let's look at corporate shared service, SG&A. Like, I see that as one family, right? And we're all there to serve two different areas. One is the business, and the other side is the people that run everything, our colleagues. And so I think my motivation is helping them, right? So it is a fall in love with those two areas. Yes.
We have a love story. This is
yeah. You found your calling. You know what's interesting is, like, when we listen to folks talk about this, it's especially when they talk about their youth in their career, it's always fascinating how there's this misconception for what HR actually is and what it could be to them, that I think if we had more people could find out, hey, it's really not what you think. It is technology, and it is, people and growing people and many other things. Yeah. And it's not just moving paper and Toby on The Office, right? Being the fun police. Yeah. I think we could attract more talent that way. I mean, there's probably 100 things we could say like that to say why we would attract more folks. But expectations and conceptions, I think, are misaligned.
Absolutely. And Peter, I think this makes me think about, like, how do you really see HR, right? There's an external facing view and there's an internal facing. I see HR as being a little corny here, right? A family. Like, if you look at any organization, any company, HR is your first family that brings you in. That just makes it's also, it's like not adopting a kid, but it's kind of like that, right?
Yeah.
Where you say, hey, this is our home. We're gonna bring you in. We're gonna kind of show you how to operate. And and let's be honest, there are good parents and there are ones who need a lot of improvement, right, in how they do parenting, right? So I think HR is that, right, to say we're going to help you build a career, build a life, and we're going to kind of show you the way. But at the same time, as they're doing that, they're also working with the business leaders and saying, hey, we're in this together. We're going to bring the right talent in, but we need to have a good handshake and we got to listen to each other, right? And wherever those gaps are there, that's where things fall apart. So it's almost like, I kind of see like it's more than just a business. There's a human connection from day zero.
There's a second home to it, I think. Yeah,
absolutely.
Family can be a little dangerous depending upon how it goes, but you're right. I think it is a home, right? It should be a safe space. It should be a trusting space that's going to help you grow and give you the value, as much value as you're giving them. And yeah, HR has such a big part of that. So I love that. Look, we had a great conversation. I don't know if anyone had a chance to listen to it, but you and I talked for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes at HR Tech on the source with DailyPay. And I'll post that in the link to that. We had a great conversation. And one of the things that came up that I wanted to drill in with you was a comment you made about empathy with action. And we talked very lightly about empathy today and how important it is. And I thought that'd be a great topic to dive into, kind of in some of these leadership subjects. I feel like we've been dipping our toes into. And in 2025, I think this is just great. But one of the things that was interesting to me, Kamal, in this subject is like, I feel like, like I knew that, right? Like I come from the military. I learned leadership at 18 from the Marines. Servant leadership, leaders eat last. All of that was incredibly ingrained in us about taking care of the unit, right? Taking care of the troops, so to speak. But I don't know that what's hard about that, I think, and maybe I realized this more after I got out of the military, is that like I feel like there's sometimes this sort of barrier that happens between empathy and weakness, or empathy and vulnerability and weakness. I've been reading, I've got it right here. I've been reading Leading with Vulnerability by Jacob Morgan. And in here, he talks about, about weak being perceived as weak. And I'm wondering if there's been this historical viewpoint by leaders that if you're empathetic, if you're vulnerable, then somehow you're a weak leader. And I just wanted to start there because I think that is a possible trap for folks. But then I also think there's folks who don't know what empathy is as a leader and maybe just haven't been taught that. So just want to talk about that concept. I mean, what are your thoughts on it? And is my theory valid?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's different ways to look at it, right? Especially us being in a corporate world, we have a job to do. Like you kind of shared, and thank you for your service, Pete.
Thank you.
It's almost like we're running a business. We have to make it sustainable while taking care of our employees. So how do you really function in a corporate environment where you're asked to make tough decisions, have tough conversations, but also now we're saying let's throw empathy in there. And then the first thing, when there's a change or a thought that that they have to now be empathetic, is are you asking them to be open, to be vulnerable, where they may be taken advantage of, or they may be seen as weak leaders? I think that is. There are always bad seeds around, right? There's bad experiences, but the reality is like just being empathetic doesn't mean that you're not goal oriented, you're not very blunt when you have to be, right? So it's one of many facets, but it is an important one that we're just shining a light on, is that people really care about how they're treated. So I think the way I want to kind of say this, like, you walk into a restaurant, you fly, in an airport, and then your experience, right, from the service that you get as a customer, as a human being, really guides your entire, um, you know, um, thought process and how you perceive the business, that entire company. And I think that's where we're really highlighting, is that being empathetic is going to really elevate your leadership instead of making you, a weak, right? I think that's the call out here.
Yeah. The way I recall, sorry, I'm forgetting his name again. Jacob Morgan. He talked about vulnerability sort of enabling your ability to be empathetic, right? Like, in other words, if you are able to be vulnerable as a leader, right, you can open up and understand the emotions, challenges, and point of views of your people, therefore making it easier naturally to be more empathetic. But I still kind of contend that there's a lot of folks that haven't been taught empathy, right? Maybe that's not how they were raised or how they were taught as leaders. And I think there are some who have resisted it, as maybe for weakness purposes, maybe because they just don't know how to be empathetic. Do you think it's something we ought to be teaching leaders? Or how do you do it?
Absolutely. I think that it's the one thing to just kind of send out guides and emails on this is what we want you to do, and have a lot of these leadership courses, right? But the reality is, like, let's ask this question: have we been teaching our leaders how to become good leaders in the first place? Right? When someone gets promoted, that's their first time probably being a manager, being a people leader, right? So now, apart from delegating the job they were doing, to now also being able to relate to that fellow colleague, right, in the right way. And how do you expand? So I think that is probably one of the most fundamental skill we should be teaching our leaders, but not just teach them, but also really educate them on what's in it for them, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the long-term sustainability of their career. And if I can't relate to you, Pete, why would I be on a podcast with you?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's as simple as that. Why would I want to work for you for the next 10, 15 years? And I think that, Pete's a great manager. He knows exactly every single payroll activity that I do. He's been a payroll expert, in his past life. But that doesn't make, that's probably one of other things that makes Pete great. But what makes Pete great is like, oh, you know what? I have a vacation coming up. I have a family emergency coming up. He empathizes with me, but then he takes action and he says, I hear you, Kamal. I hear you, Julie. Let's do this. Why don't you carve out some time so you can address those issues? So now I'm not just empathizing, I'm actually taking action. And then for Julie, the highlight of that year will be Pete actually went out of his way and really gave me time, gave me attention, not just being pathetic. That sticks with them forever, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So I think that's what we ought to be teaching our leaders.
Yeah. What's interesting, I think I've seen, I was very fortunate to work for some great companies, right at my very early age, right out of the military, went to work in a PEO. So I learned HR at scale for about 5-6 years, what good looked like, right, for HR. And then eventually went to work for the Walt Disney Company. And I think one of the things I figured out pretty quickly was like, and I'm going to say it this way, is I feel like there was like the groups of folks that were more proactively empathetic versus reactively empathetic, sort of putting out fires versus sort of like setting people up to succeed, if that's the way to say it. Far better, right? Far better cultures, far better output, far better engagement by their people. Just anecdotally, I don't have data. But I think there is something to that. I mean, would you agree? Is that a word? Is that a thing? Proactive empathy, or
I love it. I love it
in a proactive way.
I think we need to make sure the IPs are well taken care of. As we come up with new combinations here. But let's be honest, right? It's one thing to say leaders and be as empathetic as you can, and then while I want you to execute X, Y, and Z, and those could be the exact opposite to say, all right, Julie, I'm just making this up, right? Like Julie has to go on a leave, or myself, if I have to go on a leave and I only have 2 weeks of PTO, and there's no policy that really lets me do that, will the leader be empathetic and be able to take the action? Absolutely no. I think the proactive empathy that Pete, good examples, I see a lot of companies like Deloitte doing that, right? They're extending their paternity leave, from the standard, right, 16 weeks to further. Like, those are the examples of proactive empathy. It's just like, they reflect in your policies. And now when you tell your leaders to say, hey, you know what, you can practice these things, and here are the policies that actually help you proactively to be ready, so you can make sure. So I think that's where, there's a lot of fluff on one side, and there's actual substance that we need to give people. And the substance is the policies and the proactive empathy.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked on the show about sort of the angst between the C-suite and the frontline workers, right? I mean, we see it every day. There's unions flaring up. I think Amazon's going through it now. I listened to a podcast yesterday about all of that turmoil around them unionizing, and there's a lot of unions that are certainly flaring up and having strikes and whatever. Last year was hot with that. And definitely there's a lot of that sort of frontline disparity when you think about wages and just communication and other things. And I think that's where these CEOs could really benefit is, look, you're going to have to make decisions that are right for the shareholder. That's your job. You're supposed to grow the company and protect the brand. But at the end of the day, like, you can proactively, even at scale, especially at scale, prepare people for that change to ease them into it. And that's what I think I was fortunate to witness, is how Disney would make big decisions, right? Very fast. But they would always make sure that it was a smooth landing for their people. It generally wasn't a shock to anything, right? We often got very, and I saw that from firms that liked them, that were very good at it. And I think that proactive element is what, I mean, in addition to just the practice of empathy by some of our leaders, which we need to hopefully return to, is the fact that they're not proactively kind of thinking about the people as they're making decisions for the shareholder.
Yeah, that's great. That's something I was, definitely honed into long before you get to the empathetic policy or practice or action of maybe a bigger event. Just a part of an empathetic DNA is, not having people in the dark. Whether you're a manager and that's your employees, of course, the higher you get in leadership, there are different filters of things that you can share or not share. But it doesn't mean that you can't prepare your teams, prepare skills, open up conversations and kind of give just expand the thinking about what sorts of things could happen in the future, so that there isn't such a, I hit a date and now I have to, fire people or make an ultimate call on a leave, like your suggestion, Kamal. And that is an empathetic characteristic you can build into your day-to-day relationships at every level with your peers.
Builds
and with
trust big time.
Yeah.
Yep. And the other thing, that as you talk about the proactive approach, right, as these policies don't come out in a vacuum, right, to say, we're just going to do this. And that's where there's a discipline on the operation side, the shared services side, right, as payroll is a good area, benefits is a good area, where when you see people wanting to negotiate more time off than pay, or when you look at the exit survey and you see a trend that people are leaving just because there are issues with the policies of time off, or like, that means that's your data. So everything should be backed by facts, right? So I think that every company is different in their own way in the industry that they belong to. So if you can get that data, that will guide you to take those big decisions, as you mentioned, Pete and Julie. Now you're really headed towards, you have the human side, you have the data side, and now put all of them together and create such an environment, right? I'm not talking about a panacea, but at least a realistic one. What we talked about DailyPay is like, people want to get paid early. So you're not going to change the pay frequency. you bring a tool like DailyPay, and really exercise earned wage access. And I think the data should guide a lot of these. And I think that's where HR professionals from analytics, from technology, from operations come together and provide C-suite with this information and then take relevant action. So I think we're heading to empathy with action, but these are the back end, these are the background work that we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all of that, it's going to create that high performance culture, right? Just wrap it all in a bucket. I mean, a bow. Yeah. I mean, it does, right? And that's the thing though, but how do you measure the ROI of empathy? You know what I mean? I think it's built up in drops, right? Lost in buckets, built in drops.
I have a suggestion for that.
Yeah.
Just measuring empathy. So we know, from numerous different data sources that a lot of times turnover is attributed to directly to managers and the manager style, right? So increasingly we're seeing leaders like Stephen Covey has a new book out called Trust and Inspire.
Yep.
And he's talking about the type of leader that you need to be today to help seal some of those bonds of loyalty, of, trust and integrity in the workplace with teams and, of course, a family or whoever else, but specifically in the workplace. And so I can't help but think that there's a measure there. There's something to measure there. It's probably empathy and a number of other different, capabilities. It's probably not just purely empathy. But if you're looking at turnover due to poor manager style or managers who need to develop, I have to believe that empathy is one of those attributes that creates solid work relationships and loyalty and drives people to stay in place with their teams because they love their teams.
Yeah. It's almost like you're going to have to prove the byproducts of empathy in a downstream way. Sorry, I want to let you respond to that. Kamal, and I want to share something along these lines.
Oh, no, sure. I was just kind of, as Julie was kind of sharing that, I think, I don't know, Pete, if we talked about it, but I kind of, the thought came to mind about this tool called Happy, HAPPI, right? How they were measuring that at restaurants where every shift clocking in, they would ask the colleagues, how are you feeling today? And then it would lead to another question. So you're not waiting for a QBR. You're not waiting for an annual survey. You really have an employee listening and engagement and all the different metrics that Julie mentioned is, how your colleagues are feeling altogether, right? So I think that's one. And the other piece is the emotional intelligence is one of the highest sought out skill and a competency that we look for leaders, right? So it's something that we can help build, but I think that we're kind of headed toward the direction is like just being able to do a job and then being able to delegate that to somebody does not make you a people leader. And now we're going to figure out a way to measure those and also develop people leaders who are empathetic as you have been, right? So I think that's a skill as we talk about skills, I would say that's a big buzzword. Well, we can pause there, but go ahead, Pete. Yep.
So Julie, do you want to say something?
Well, I was just cracking up because while you're talking about happy, Kamal, I'm like thinking, are those the smiley faces that you push in the bathroom?
No.
Like red, yellow, and green pouty face. But truthfully, I mean, in all the experience portals and experience technologies, and even rewards and recognition types of tools that HR is deploying, there's that happy element, right? Where you're just trying to get point in time, take a pulse and figure out what's going on, and where people's heads are at. That should be helping us, right, to try to quantify some of these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's tough too. One of the things I want to point you to, and I'll share this link. I shared this on my Twitter, I think yesterday or the day before. It's a new article based on research from Chicago Booth. I think that's the business school, right? University of Chicago. And basically this article is titled that CEOs' soft and interpersonal skills have not increased over time. And basically what it's saying is that there's other research and certainly media that is pointing to the fact that, with a larger swath of millennials and younger generations in the workforce, that interpersonal skills and softer skills are going to become much more important for the CEO in the future, as we just said. But what's interesting is they looked at 5,000 executives over like a 30 characteristic framework, pre and post 2008-9 market crash, and ultimately came away with the fact that basically that's not what's really happening. And what I came away from that with is boards are still incentivizing the sort of old style of management that is still producing results. But how do you put the ROI to show? And I'm sure you can show results. Obviously, the results are the results and the proof. But how do you dial that back and peel that back and go, look, it's partly because of the empathetic culture that, or whatever, the empathy within our culture that has created trust and created collaboration and created the opportunity for us to be a high performance organization. So I just think it's interesting because I think you still have the old guard and the old way of thinking that is rewarding the non-interpersonal sort of CEO, and yet what they're being told and what maybe the new generations are, I guess that's a presumptive, are expecting is this more empathetic leader, right? So it's just an interesting conundrum that I think is there.
I love that statement, Pete. And so here I did a keynote back in October last year, and it was about HR transformation through empathy, wellness, and AI, right?
Yeah.
So what a weird combination if you think about it, but that's where we are. And the way I led that, let me share some facts with you. So 2023, 1.64 million people were laid off just in the US alone, right? And 2024 numbers, probably are close range too. But if we think about the emotional and psychological well-being, like these are some of the numbers and I can quote you the sources, but 92% of the employees, they really value the emotional and psychological well-being, right?
Yeah.
48% of the employees reported that there was a decline in their mental health. You can think about, the layoffs, the burnout, and everything. So when you ask the question, Pete, is what's the ROI with this whole conversation we're having, is that benefits, the turnover, when I talk about benefits, like if your insurance rockets is right, you're actually paying for that in a different way, the claims. If you have a higher turnover, you're paying for additional payroll runs. The cost of hiring is at least 1.5 to 2 times the compensation, depending on the range of the employee, right? The higher you go, it actually increases. So HR really, it's hard to say HR does not generate revenue. It's not directly proportional, but there's every single element that actually can be linked to the cost. And so I think that employee well-being should be the number one focus of any organization. Having a healthy workforce will help you reach your goals faster, and how do you measure that? I think we've kind of talked about some of the, employee engagement surveys and other things, but the ROI can be shown, Pete. And, I've done that in multiple places that I've worked. And I think that that's the education we need to show, that end of the day, I get it. The board wants to see it. The CEOs want to see it, but HR has to step up and show those numbers.
Yeah,
well,
agreed.
The typical challenge with that is if it's not a part of an operational budget, the numbers are there, but it's difficult to show that they materialize as they're projected, right? I mean, they're still very real dollars, but the CFO can't take them out of somebody's operations budget. And so
but the outcomes are material.
The outcomes are material, and so there needs to be a little bit more of a balance between the material and the immaterial outcome, and some sense of faith in the fact that, this is common sense. It costs to bring in new people instead of have the people that, like there is something real there. It's just you can't cut a budget or slash a budget.
Put your finger on it, basically.
To fund whatever it is you want to do. Right?
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that there's, some of the things that I see there is historically the old school, right, as HR kind of owns that entire problem, right? And kind of has to really come up with every solution. I get it, but the new school of thought in my mind, Julie, right, is that if you're working with multiple business units within the company and they all have that operational budget and HR's helping them materialize it, get the right talent through the door, that means it's a shared ownership across the board. It's not just an HR problem, it's a company-wide problem, right? The CEO has to address to the board. So I think that's where we probably need to, we have opportunity to join hands. And one of the things that I've been part of in the previous roles that I've been is that when we bring this data, even it doesn't just become HR data. It becomes data for that particular business unit, for that leader.
Yes.
So I don't want HR to do the voiceover, right? And but I know it's easily said than done, but it has to be done in the new school of
HR
thought.
data is business data.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Kamal, when you say empathy with action, what does that look like?
I'll give you a
we've thrown that around. I want to make sure we define it, so to speak.
Absolutely. I'll share a personal example. I don't know if I shared that the last time too, but I'm going to do it here again, and that stuck with me. Is we're working our way throughout the year. I'm in this meeting. One of my direct reports, like usually you don't hear from this person because they're so well self-sufficient. Let's just say they don't need me basically. But this one fine afternoon, they just knock on the door as I'm in the meeting, and I'm like, I'm sure there's something important that came up, and their pet was about to have a litter,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a situation, and I could have laughed. I could have said, you got to wait till your end of the shift, but my instinct, and I'm not saying that I have a very high, EQ, but
that day, maybe.
You could argue I had a really good breakfast. It started out well, yes, but it was just like, what, I could relate, and because I have two beautiful boys, and I was like, yeah, you should go take care of them, and then as long as I trust you with the work, and it was a simple thing, Pete and Julie, right, that I'm mentioning, but it meant a lot for that colleague. And we do performance reviews throughout the year. Who cares about an annual performance review on how many tasks you do? You move on to the next year, right? But they do care about how they felt in that moment, and they were able to spend that time, and they were able to take care of their emotions. So I wasn't just like, oh, that's so cute, and I think you should really wait till end of the day. No, I actually had to take an action, not just be empathetic. So I feel like, Peter, we talked about it's not just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I truly mean. And there could be plenty of examples, but I feel like it could be small, it could be big, but you got to be there, or else,
It's these little dividends of equity I think you're building with people, right? Where you're trust, I guess, not equity really, I suppose is the word, but where you're really sort of like, because how productive would that employee be if they're on their shift and they're stressed out and concerned about their family or their home? Not very, right? So what are you getting out of them? So maybe you're playing a longer game, more infinite-minded game, I think, here, saying, look, take care of what you need to take care of. We can handle, the widgets for today, and come back when everything's all right, And I think that you're right. That's going to go a long way with someone when they're thinking about, do I stay or do I go? From this employer, they care about me.
Those personal exceptions, and oftentimes some of the things that we're citing are, bending a rule, right, or bending a policy, or doing something that is very important to that person. But I do believe that there are plenty of opportunities for empathy and action just in the course of how you're managing your projects or your project work, or how the team pulls together. If somebody's, trying to take a long weekend and there's some deliverable, I mean, like you can begin to exercise some of that empathy and build that culture and that teamwork outside of having to be the manager bending policy. Though those are probably the most memorable and the most appreciated ones.
Absolutely,
but
Julie.
Still.
But all of that is rooted in knowing your people too, right? I mean, like it goes back to like when you're engaging them about what motivates them, right? It's going to be different. And maybe, what from one to the next, it's some other driver for why they're there. And I think you have to meet them with that. And that's exactly, I think, a great example of what you did there. So.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I want to go back, Julie, about the Franklin Covey. I've attended those webinars and I have some of the books like Speed of Trust. And frankly, what we're saying is that we want to build that trust with organic actions. Yeah. And no matter what the situation is, I trust you to do the job. And I trust you that you should definitely take that time, whatever that situation is. I think that any organization that wants to progress and hit that, those milestones together, their colleagues have to be trusting their leaders. Their leaders have to be trusting their CEO, and the board has to trust. So I think that level of trust comes with these, small actions day to day that actually, compound. And I feel like fundamentally, we kind of miss that because we're so black and white with our policies, So I'm not saying that you should bend the rule, but create that environment where you can make that judgment, right? Or else why would we have people leaders? Let's just wait for the AI thing to come over and take over, right? I think that's I think that's probably the next revolution that we need to look at, industry wise. And the fact, right, that I want to bring here is we're kind of stepping like in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to have a significant workforce retire.
Yep.
We're welcoming Gen Zs, right? Millennials are
There's a new one now. There's a new one. Did you guys know that? 2025, I think they start. I think it's beta, right?
Beta.
Oh, yeah.
Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
2025.
So how are we going to create this workforce, or work environment where we can function with multiple cultures, but with so much technology in between? And there's so much, I want to say the word is VUCA, right? The VUCA world, that's what they talk about. And I think that policies are great, but if we can build that kind of culture, if we can build that kind of leaders, then we're setting up ourselves for success. And I speak for the entire industries, right? And not just for one particular company.
Agreed. But how in all of this, Kamal, do you think I feel like at the same time, technology is connecting us more, right? With folks we probably never would maybe get to interact with, otherwise. It seems like we're also a little bit more walled off, right? In our own worlds, in our own silos. And if AI keeps proliferating, are we going to get less empathetic, right? Less, more just sort of dehumanized in some way because we're so augmented? Or do you think the augmentation is going to be helpful? Like, what's your point of view just on tech and AI as far as helping with things like empathy and other soft skills?
I think that there's always, the good and bad on both sides, right? But I like to look at, let's talk about, we just finished the year, we did annual reviews and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that our managers dread doing that, right? Because that's additional time. Our employees dread doing that. It's like, how can we use tech to make it more easier for them? So if we can use tech in such a way where their conversations are more organic, but the tech has enabled them to finish the review in a matter of minutes than hours, right? Yeah. So that's one example. So I feel like the revolution of AI and technology is only going to help us be better in terms of time savings. Then that will create that environment where people can have organic conversations between their teams. So I feel that's one way I look at it, Pete.
Yeah. More time for connection, I think, is what you're
absolutely
to there. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I agree. I think leaders are going to should have a lot more opportunity and capacity to lead. And this is where I think they could be spending time. You're right. Understanding their people, working on their development, moving obstacles, all the things managers should be doing today, but are probably tied down with whatever minutia in their world is going on. So a lot of opportunity.
We kind of let an acronym slide without calling out what it is, just in case folks, aren't following. VUCA, I think, Kamal, that you called out, is usually related to volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which totally describes not only the world we're in, we're increasingly in, but also some of the AI and other tools are designed to fit those characteristics. So I know it was thrown in a little bit earlier, but I just thought it might be worth calling
Thank you,
out.
Julie.
Like, what the hell is that?
My
Appreciate
apologies.
The play-by-play.
I should have kind of explained it a little bit. But I think, Pete, going back to your point about, this empathy with action for HR, I think there's never been a, good time to really shine, because pandemic definitely gave HR the seat at the table, right? But how do you really show up from there? How do you really make it count?
Yeah.
And I think the piece that, if you look at marketing, if you look at finance, they have leveraged tech the right way. They have. HR's behind, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Every implementation, you have to really kind of show the ROI for, products like Workday and Oracle. Is like, what am I getting out of it? All I'm going to get is paid, and all the things you're doing is performance reviews, and you're
only going to do all the things you did before.
Exactly. So why should I pay 3 times? And if you add more, the cloud computing costs, and now you're going to add AI, they're going to ask the same question.
Yeah.
But if you flip that to a different way to say, hey, you know what? We're going to make this operation so smooth that every HR business partner conversation is not about the to-dos, but it's about the strategic ones, because the AI has really automated a lot of those minutiae that you talked about, to say, if our Gen Z and the beta, right, group, like, they want answers within the click of a button. I'm not saying they don't have the patience, but we've kind of all been in that way. It's like, we want one-click answer. We want to be able to see that. The face IDs, right? It's like, I can't wait for a week. Like, if you talk about a paycheck, a paper check, and Pete, I mean, I know this is like, you probably talked about multiple times. They're like, what is this, right?
Yeah. It's right? Like I've said this before. My son, if you asked him to apply to a job and you didn't have an app, he wouldn't even think you existed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I feel that this is where we need to appreciate AI. But before we jump on the AI bandwagon, let's make sure, have very honest and open conversation about our technology spend. How are we really using it? And what's the potential that we should be, looking at, and how much spend that we should go forward towards AI? Is it going to automate 40%? That we still have people, but you have more real-time data. You have from 10 touch points to maybe 2 for our colleagues. And I think all of those combined together, now HR's really in the business, right? With the business having those strategic conversations rather than keeping the lights on. I think that's the opportunity that I wanted to highlight again.
Yeah. I love that. I think, and it's about time, right? I mean, it's long overdue. So it's very much appreciated. Julie, you were going to say something?
No, I usually chime in along the way.
I know.
It's just comic relief or something else.
It's like I was sitting here thinking the Gen Beta, they're going to come to work with their own AI assistants. We're going to have to hire them and their AI assistant.
Absolutely.
That's all I think about when I hear them say it's a new generation.
Makes me think of Lattice's, that whole fiasco we had in 2024, right? And I know I'm not pounding them for that. Obviously, like
marketing.
Things get blown out of proportion, but we are
good
headed
marketing.
there. Yeah, absolutely.
You know what it makes me think of, Pete, is our, what, by the time this comes out, our last podcast release will have been on just kind of AI and everything you do with Amy. So, and she gave us some real insights on how it feels to go from an organization and just a general way of working that included that to making a shift somewhere where that's not at all the norm, and you have to kind of start from zero again. And those types of shifts will be just supremely important to your Gen Alphas and Gen Betas, right?
Yeah.
By the time we get there, here it's an annoyance maybe for the those who are on the forefront of adopting something. Within a matter of a generation. We're going to be talking about folks who don't want to go work for the legacy non-AI enabled workforce.
Yeah. Was I right? Is it beta, the new one?
I didn't look it up, but I think you're right. I mean, they went to alpha, so why not beta?
Double check me on that. Isn't that the new one for 2025? I think it's beta. I may be wrong. We may be calling it all wrong. We're already stereotyping them, and they're not even.
You know what? It is. I did a quick look up while we're here. It's beta? Generation Beta starting this year to 2039.
All right, here we go.
You're safe.
Yeah.
You haven't said something ridiculously ludicrous that we can laugh at forever.
Yeah. Well, good. Kamal, this has been really fantastic. I could go on and on. I say that to a lot of our guests, but I really mean that. I could go on asking you all kinds of questions, and I'd love for you to come back at some point as well, man. But where can folks connect with you? What you're going to be here in the coming months?
Thank you, Pete and Julie. It's been really fun. It's not one of those just very I want to say topic focus. Like I really love the energy, and we don't have to be right. We could be wrong, right? And we want to be right, but it's okay. Like
sometimes we are
kind of sometimes we are, and let's be honest.
Once in a while, once a year, we're wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Absolutely. And I'm very I want to say active on LinkedIn. That's the best way people reach me. Just look for my name, Kamal Pradhan. There's a lot of folks with that name, but there's only one based out of in Dallas. And I'm always looking forward to connect with folks who want to learn more about the HR world of ops, tech, transformation, all of the different things. And the other thing I also want to share is that there are very few of folks who are promoting the importance of payroll, HR, how it impacts our workforce, right? Not just from a finance perspective. Today we touched on empathy. I heard about the AI pieces of it. So you guys are doing a tremendous job. And I love the fact that you guys decided to continue this in 2025. I just had to throw it out there.
We're not going anywhere. We've been here since 2022. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep it running. So appreciate you.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I think meeting you in Vegas was amazing. And Pete, we've got some mutual connections. Shout out to Steve Goldberg, and Julie, knowing you has been great. But I feel that we need more of us really willing to be wrong, but highlighting what the future looks like and bringing the key issues and awareness in the world of HR, in the world of workplace to make it better. So thank you for having me. It's been a great podcast so far. And I just want to do a quick hashtag of empathy with action. Let's practice in our daily lives, not just at work, in our personal and with ourselves too, right? It's you got to be empathetic to yourself. And, I think that's where you start. And self-care is number one. If you're individual contributor, for sure. If you're a leader, you need it actually more. So that's my spill, Pete.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Julie, anything you got?
Listen, thanks, Kamal, for mentioning that we're continuing on. We don't plan to end anytime soon. And we know you gave us some stats on our listenership that's been increasing in our what to look for in 2025, which is one of our popular topics. So listen for the stats there. And we'd love to have folks just, subscribe wherever it is you listen. Give us some feedback. Tell us what else you want to hear about. That's one of the things that, Peter and I are really excited for is just being able to get more feedback outside. We always get great feedback when we're having conversations like with you.
Yeah,
Kamal,
absolutely. I love it.
We have a few folks that interact with us. Email us, reach out to us on LinkedIn. So keep those coming. Let us know what you want to hear, what you want more of. Tell us your feedback. And like we said, review, share, all those things help us out. And be sure and check out all the shows on the Work Defined Network. Thank you so much to them for having us. It's going to be our first full year in 2025, Work Defined. we're very happy with it. It's been great. A lot of exposure been coming to the podcast. And look for the Payroll Profession Confidence Index. It's out there. Don't miss the opportunity to get your voice in on that.
That's awesome.
It's going to be a key. So we're just getting started.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. Happy 2025 again. And we will talk to you very soon.